Ethan Cole loved fishing more than anything, and when his childhood friend Sarah invited him to explore an isolated lake hidden deep in the woods, he couldn't resist. But the deeper they rode into the fog, the stranger the water became. What surfaced from the darkness below wasn't a fish at all, it was something that should never have been pulled from the lake. The lake had always been my retreat, a place where I could disappear from the world for a while. It was hidden deep in the woods, surrounded by tall trees that whispered with the faintest breeze. That morning I arrived before the sun had fully risen, when the sky was still gray and the mist clung stubbornly to the water's surface. I stood on the creaking dock with my tackle box in one hand and my rod in the other, staring out at the endless blanket of fog. The air was sharp and damp, filling my lungs with the scent of wet earth and stagnant water. I told myself it was just another fishing trip, nothing unusual. But there was something about the silence that morning that felt different, heavier, as if the lake itself was holding its breath. I pushed the small rowboat into the water and climbed inside, the wood groaning beneath my weight. My reflection in the water was broken into fragments by the ripples, but even then, I noticed how pale I looked, as though the mist had drained the color from my skin. I sat down, grabbed the oars and began to row. The sound of the oars dipping into the water echoed unnaturally loud, bouncing back to me from somewhere unseen. The shore slipped away behind me, swallowed by fog until I could no longer tell which direction I had come from. The deeper I went, the more endless the lake seemed. The fog grew thicker, wrapping around me until I felt trapped in a wide void. The world beyond the boat had vanished. I paused, resting the oars, and let the boat drift. The water below was black and still, as though it had no depth, no life beneath its surface. My stomach tightened as I set my fishing rod, baited the hook, and cast the line into the darkness. The plunk of the bait breaking the water was swallowed quickly, leaving silence again. Time began to lose its meaning. Minutes could have been hours, and hours could have been seconds. I checked my watch, but the hands had stopped. I tapped the glass, but it refused to move. A strange unease crept over me. I shifted uncomfortably, pulling my jacket tighter around me, but the damp air still seeped into my skin. Finally, the line jerked. At first it was a gentle tug, almost hesitant, but then it grew stronger, pulling with a force that bent the rod nearly in half. My heart jumped with excitement and fear. This was no ordinary fish. My arms strained as I reeled it in, the reel screaming under the pressure. The boat rocked violently as the unseen thing thrashed beneath the surface. The water bubbled and churned as though something massive was fighting against me. I pulled harder, every muscle aching, until the line cut the surface. For a split second I thought I had caught something enormous, maybe a record-breaking fish that would make the struggle worth it. But when the water spilled away, I froze. What dangled from the hook was not a fish at all. It was pale and grotesque, its shape unmistakable, a human hand. Swollen and discolored as though it had been submerged for years, the fingers twitched as if they were alive, curling and uncurling in a slow, sickening rhythm. Water dripped from its bloated knuckles, landing on the boat's wood with sharp hollow taps that echoed in the silence. I stared, paralyzed, my stomach churning. Every instinct screamed to let go, to throw the rod overboard and flee back to shore, but my body refused to move. The hand writhed on the line like it was struggling against the hook. My chest tightened as bile burned my throat. And then, with one final convulsion, the thing slipped free and vanished back into the water without a sound. The ripples spread out across the surface, soft and deliberate, until the lake was calm again, as though nothing had happened. But I knew something had. The rod dangled limply in my hands, the line still dripping. The mist pressed in closer, thick and suffocating. And even though the lake appeared empty, I couldn't shake the feeling that something below was watching me, waiting for me to cast my line again. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was a silence that felt alive, and it was holding me there, daring me to move. I sat frozen in the boat, my rod hanging limp in my hands, the air around me colder than it had been just moments before. The image of that pale, bloated hand clung to my mind, replaying over and over like a nightmare that refused to end. I told myself I must have imagined it, that maybe it had been an old glove or a bundle of weeds twisted into a shape my frightened mind turned into fingers. But no matter how hard I tried to convince myself, the memory of those twitching knuckles and dripping fingertips was too vivid, too real. I wanted to leave. Every part of me screamed to grab the oars and row back to shore, to run as far away from this cursed lake as possible. But when I turned around, I realized I had no idea where the shore was anymore. The mist had thickened into a wall of white, pressing in on every side, endless and suffocating. I could see no trees, no dock, no hint of direction. I was lost in a sea of fog, surrounded by nothing but black water stretching into infinity. The air grew heavier, and I noticed a strange smell, wet, sour and faintly sweet, like rotting fruit. It clung to the back of my throat, making me gag. I gripped the oars and began rowing blindly, putting all my strength into each stroke. The boat slid forward, but it felt as if I wasn't moving at all. The fog refused to thin, and the world refused to change. I rowed until my arms ached, until sweat stung my eyes. But when I finally stopped, it was as though I hadn't gone anywhere. I sat in the stillness, my chest heaving, and tried to steady my breathing. That was when I heard its 3 slow knocks, faint but distinct, coming from beneath the boat. My head snapped down, my heart thundering in my ears. I thought maybe it was just the wood creaking, the water shifting, but then it came again. 3 knocks, evenly spaced, deliberate. I leaned over the edge, staring into the black water. It stared back, reflecting only my pale, frightened face. I waited, my breath shallow, every nerve screaming. The knocking stopped. The silence stretched on until I almost convinced myself it had been nothing. I sat back, wiping the sweat from my forehead, but just as my hands left the edge of the boat, something changed in the reflection. It wasn't my face looking back at me anymore. The water shifted slightly, but clear enough to reveal another face, gray bloated, the features distorted by death. Its eyes were cloudy white, its mouth sagging open, and yet I swore I saw its lips moving as though it were whispering something. No sound reached my ears, but the sight alone was enough to chill my blood. I jerked back, my body slamming against the other side of the boat, nearly tipping it over. My chest burned as I tried to catch my breath, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the water. When I forced myself to look again, the face was gone. The surface was empty, calm, showing only the fog above. I sat trembling, clutching the side of the boat, fighting the rising panic. I wanted to scream for help, but the thought of my voice echoing into the void was unbearable. No one would hear me anyway. I was alone, stranded in the middle of a lake that no longer felt like a lake at all. I gripped the oars again and rowed in the opposite direction, refusing to look down, refusing to look at the water. My muscles screamed, but I pushed through, desperate to find land. Every few seconds I caught myself glancing nervously into the mist, convinced something was moving out there, just beyond sight. But the world remained empty, silent. Then, just as my arms gave out and I let the oars fall limp at my sides, the sound returned. Not knocking this time, but a slow, deliberate scrape, as though something sharp was dragging itself along the bottom of the boat. The noise circled me, moving from one side to the other, long and grating. My teeth clenched as I tried to stay still, my body trembling so violently I thought the boat would tip over. The scraping stopped suddenly, leaving me in suffocating silence once again. I forced myself to look down, knowing I shouldn't, knowing I would regret it. But the curiosity was unbearable. I leaned over the edge, and for a moment all I saw was the black water, still and endless. Then, just beneath the surface, something moved. A pale shape shifted in the depths, twisting slowly, almost lazily, like it knew I was watching. And then, for the briefest second, I saw it again, the same face, closer this time. Its milky eyes staring directly into mine, lips stretched into a grin too wide to belong to anything human. The image of that wide, unnatural grin seared itself into my mind, and I stumbled backward so fast the boat rocked violently beneath me. My heart hammered against my ribs, every beat echoing in my ears louder than the silence around me. I pressed myself against the wooden bench, afraid that if I leaned too close to the water again, the face would rise from the depths and pull me under. The air was damp and heavy, clinging to my skin, and every breath felt like it carried the faint taste of rot. I closed my eyes and tried to steady myself, but the memory of those white, unblinking eyes refused to fade. I told myself I needed to stay calm, to think rationally, but logic was a stranger in this place. Hours seemed to pass without the fog changing, without the world shifting even an inch. I didn't know if it was morning or evening, if time had simply stopped or if I had slipped into some place where it no longer mattered. My stomach growled, but the thought of food turned sour in my mouth. Hunger was easier to endure than the thought of reaching into the tackle box, only to find something worse than bait inside. It was close, too close. I sat up instantly, my chest tight with panic, and scanned the water. Ripples spread across the surface, circling the boat, though nothing broke through. The splashing grew louder, more deliberate, like someone swimming in circles just out of sight. My throat dried as I gripped the oars, ready to strike if anything surfaced. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the splashing stopped. The silence returned, but it was heavier now, pressing down on me until I could hardly breathe. I stayed frozen, every muscle tense, waiting for anything to happen. Then the boat jolted from underneath, hard enough to rattle my teeth together. I grabbed the sides to steady myself, but another jolt hit, this one stronger. Rocking the boat so violently I thought it would flip. Something was beneath me, shoving against the hull, trying to overturn me. The thought of being thrown into that black water made my blood run cold. I clung desperately, my nails digging into the wood, whispering in my mind that it had to stop, that it couldn't keep going forever. But the rocking grew more violent, slamming the boat from side to side. My knees buckled and I crashed against the bench, barely holding on. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the movement stopped. The boat drifted in perfect stillness again, as though nothing had happened. My breath came in short, sharp gasps, but the water around me was calm, undisturbed, silent. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it, that maybe I'd been hallucinating from exhaustion, but then I saw it. The water rippled, not from the wind, but from something rising, slowly, unnervingly slow, two pale hands broke the surface on either side of the boat. The skin was gray, swollen, with patches where it had sloughed away to reveal bone beneath. The fingers curled over the edge of the boat, dripping with cold, foul-smelling water. My stomach lurched as I realized they were gripping tightly, pulling. A head followed, breaking through the black water with agonizing slowness. The face was the same one I had seen in the reflection, gray and lifeless, the eyes cloudy and wrong. Water poured from its mouth in a steady stream as though it was still drowning even now. My hands shook so violently I almost dropped the oar I had grabbed in defense. I swung at the figure, the wood cutting through the air with a desperate crack. But when it struck, it passed through as if the figure wasn't solid. The oar didn't knock it back, didn't even disturb it. The figure only stared at me with those blind, milky eyes, its lips moving silently, whispering words I could not hear but somehow still felt deep inside my skull. My temples throbbed as if my thoughts were no longer my own, as if the whispers were planting themselves inside me. I squeezed my eyes shut, clamping my hands over my ears even though no sound was reaching them. The whispers grew louder, not through my ears but through my mind, pressing in, filling me with thoughts that weren't mine. I rocked back and forth, begging silently for it to stop, for it to vanish. When I finally opened my eyes again, the figure was gone. The boat was empty, the water calm. For a moment I thought I had broken free from whatever nightmare had gripped me, but then I noticed the inside of the boat wasn't empty anymore. Resting on the damp wood near my feet was something small, glinting faintly in the fog-filtered light. I leaned closer, heart pounding, and froze when I saw it clearly. It was a ring, a plain gold wedding band, still clinging to a severed, waterlogged finger. The sight of the severed finger lying in the boat sent a wave of nausea rolling through me. The skin was gray and puckered, stretched tight over bone, the flesh pruned and swollen as if it had been underwater for years. The gold band sat stubbornly on it, dull but still intact, a strange reminder that this once belonged to someone. Someone who had lived and breathed before ending up here. I stared at it, unable to move, unable to look away. It wasn't just the horror of what it was the realization that I hadn't been imagining anything. Whatever haunted this lake was real, and it had chosen me. I forced myself to the farthest corner of the boat, curling against the edge, as if distance could protect me. My chest tightened with every shallow breath. I told myself not to touch it, not to even get closer, but the more I stared, the more it seemed to glisten, as though the gold itself was alive, catching what little light filtered through the mist. I squeezed my eyes shut, but that only made the image sharper in my mind, burned there like a brand. The boat rocked slightly, but not from my movements. A ripple passed beneath me, gentle at first, then stronger, pushing the boat as if something massive was shifting below. I gripped the wooden seat until my knuckles ached. The water darkened, bubbles rising to the surface, and for a moment I thought I saw shapes moving just below the black surface. My stomach twisted as I realized they weren't fish, they were limbs, arms reaching upward, bodies twisting slowly in the depths. Too far down to be clear but too human to ignore. The mist pressed in thicker, curling low to the water, and that was when the whispering began again. It wasn't sound exactly, it was thought, sliding into my mind, uninvited. It carried no words I could recognize, but I understood it all the same. A pressure behind my eyes, like someone else was inside my head, turning over my memories, touching them. I clamped my hands over my ears, though I knew it would do nothing. The whispering grew louder, insistent, until it felt like it was pulling me forward, closer to the water's edge. And then the boat jolted hard, throwing me sideways. I scrambled, catching myself against the edge before I fell in. The water churned violently now, splashing against the sides, and then I saw them again, those same pale hands rising up, gripping the edge of the boat. The wood groaned under the strain as the thing pulled itself higher. First its shoulders broke the surface, then its chest, dripping, bloated, and dripping trails of black water into the boat. I grabbed the oar, my only weapon, and swung with all my strength. The wood passed through its head as if it were made of smoke. The figure didn't flinch, didn't falter. Its dead eyes locked onto mine, its lips moving faster now, the silent whispers flooding through me. My skull felt like it was splitting apart, and my vision blurred around the edges. The figure leaned closer, its face inches from mine. Water poured from its mouth, splattering onto my lap, soaking through my clothes with an icy chill. I gagged as the smell hit me so rotten, like something that had been trapped under water too long. My body shook uncontrollably as I tried to push back, but it was useless. And then, just as suddenly, it was gone. The boat rocked violently as if it had released its grip, and I gasped for air, curling into myself. My chest rose and fell in shallow, desperate bursts. I didn't want to look, but my eyes betrayed me, darting toward the center of the boat. The severed finger wasn't alone anymore. Scattered across the damp wood were more 5, 6, maybe 7 fingers, each bloated and discolored, some still adorned with rings. I pressed myself against the boat's edge, bile rising in my throat. My mind screamed that they hadn't been there moments ago, that they had been placed there, gifted to me by something that wanted me to understand I wasn't leaving. I closed my eyes, trembling, but the whispering still lingered, quieter now, like it was waiting. I knew then that it wouldn't stop. Whatever lived in this lake wasn't trying to scare me, it was claiming me, piece by piece. And as the boat rocked gently beneath me, I realized the wood was no longer dry. Water was seeping in, cold against my shoes, though there were no cracks, no holes. It was as if the lake itself had decided to rise into the boat, pulling me down without ever tipping me over. The water that seeped into the boat crept across the floorboards in thin streams, soaking into my shoes, chilling my feet until I could no longer feel my toes. I tried to push myself high onto the bench, clutching the oar as if it could protect me, but the sight of all those fingers scattered across the bottom held me in place. They seemed to glisten in the fog-dimmed light, like they were freshly cut, though I knew they had been in the water for years. Some wore rings, dull with age, while others were bare, their nails chipped or missing entirely. They looked like offerings, left behind as warnings, or perhaps as trophies. The air was thick, and every breath tasted stale, almost metallic, as though I were already suffocating beneath the lake. The boat rocked again, though no wind touched the water. The surface around me had gone strangely still, as if the entire lake was holding itself in one long breath. Then came the bubbles, rising slowly, breaking through the silence. At first I thought it might be a fish, but the bubbles grew in number, forming a wide circle around the boat. My chest tightened. Something massive was below me, circling, waiting. I leaned over against my better judgment, staring into the black. The fog parted just enough to reveal what I had feared. Faces, dozens of them, just below the surface, pale and bloated, their eyes clouded white. They hovered motionless, watching me with expressions that were neither angry nor kind, only patient. Their mouths opened and closed in unison, whispering words I couldn't hear, words I felt instead, pressing into the back of my mind like claws. The pressure built behind my eyes until tears spilled down my cheeks. I scrambled to the oars, forcing them into the water. My arms burned as I pulled, desperate to get away, though I knew there was nowhere to go. The fog swallowed everything, and the harder I rowed, the thicker it became, until it felt as if I were trapped in a cage made of white. My movements grew frantic, every stroke slower than the last, the water dragging against me as if resisting. My breathing turned ragged, shallow, and I thought for a moment that maybe I would collapse there, my body giving up before the lake could claim me. The boat jolted again, harder this time, and I nearly lost my grip on the oars. Something struck from beneath, a heavy thud that made the wood groan. The whispers inside my head grew louder, rising into screams that were not mine but echoed through my skull as if they belonged there. My vision blurred, the edges turning dark, but I forced myself to hold on. I couldn't give in, not yet. Then the boat tipped sharply, water rushing in. My body slammed against the side, and I felt the icy splash soak through me. Before I could recover, a pale arm shot out of the water and grabbed the edge of the boat. Another followed, then another, until hands were clutching at the wood from every side. The boat groaned under their weight, rocking violently as they pulled. I screamed, though no sound escaped my throat, as more heads rose from the water, eyes fixed on me, mouths stretched wide in silent, gaping smiles. The boat overturned. The cold swallowed me whole, stealing my breath, filling my lungs with icy needles. I thrashed, my limbs heavy, sluggish, as if the water itself clung to me, dragging me down. Through the darkness, shapes moved, circling, reaching, hands brushed against my legs, my arms, my face. Their touch was soft, almost gentle, but I knew it was meant to bind me. My eyes stung as I forced them open, and what I saw filled me with a terror deeper than anything I had ever known. The faces surrounded me in every direction, impossibly close now. Their mouths were no longer whispering silently, they were screaming, a soundless, endless scream that filled my mind, splitting it open. My thoughts scattered like birds into the fog, leaving only the echo of their voices. I tried to fight to kick upward, but my body felt heavier with every second. The weight of the water pressed me down, down into the circle of faces, until I was one of them, until my eyes too clouded and my mouth joined in the voiceless chant. And yet, I didn't die. My body floated among theirs, but my mind was awake, trapped, forced to see through eyes that weren't mine anymore. Time passed, or maybe it didn't. I could no longer tell. All I knew was that I waited in the depths with the others, staring upward, until the faint sound of oars broke the silence again. Somewhere above the fog, another boat drifted out onto the lake. I felt my lips curl into that same wide, unnatural grin, even as my mind screamed from within, because I understood now. The lake hadn't taken me to end me. It had taken me to make me wait, to become part of the welcome for the next fisherman who would wander too far into the mist.